You got to play hurt. That's what they say. Jon Wilner playing hurt today. Little under the weather. What do you got going on? Let's full disclosure.
Sinus infection. Little sinus infection.
All right.
And there's nothing better for a sinus infection than some good old 50 degrees and rain in the Pacific Northwest, right?
There you go.
Where I'm headed. So.
No, you're headed up. We're going to talk about that coming up. I'll tell you, as a radio guy that has a radio show, a little shot of whiskey never hurts you. You know, just a little shot if you needed to get through this. I had Lars Larson teach me that, the political talk show host. He opened his cabinet and he had a flask down there, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go there, but it'll help you. Helps your pipes just a little bit if you need that.
And
but you're on. What do you want?
So you've done that, huh?
I've done that. I've done it. I've tried everything, man. Because there's some times where if you got to get through 3 hours of radio, you don't realize what a muscle there is going on there. That is a muscle that you got to take care of. So
I don't know how you do it.
I don't know either sometimes. And you can feel it coming on. You're like, ooh, I better not talk at anything but being on air. So
yes,
it's tricky. But what do you have? Honey, tea? What do you have? What do you got going?
Ginger tea with honey. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to slug this thing the whole broadcast.
All right.
Hope for the best.
We'll try to make this. We'll try to make this less painful than Oregon State. Can we start there? 0-6 football team. You've got an NIL problem with Blueprint Sports. They're under a lot of fire. You got a deputy AD who basically came out and said the athletes don't matter. Everyone forgets about them. 15 years. You lose your key quarterback recruit, Deegan Rose. He decommits amid all of this. He's now committed to Fresno State. It will be another Pac-12 school, but that is a big blow. And Trent Bray's program really reeling right now.
And they finally fired the special teams coordinator, right? I mean, weeks too late. I didn't understand that. To me, that move just put more spotlight on the situation because, you know, Bray had said, a week before wasn't a good time. And just a week late. I mean, what is going on there?
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things. I mean, one is, you know, you have a coach who's took over a program, and, you know, any coach who comes in and takes over a program is dealing with 50 or 70 new players and a lot of turnover. But amid that, you've got first-time head coach Trent Bray. That's a challenge. You've got a first-time play caller in Ryan Gunderson calling the plays.
Yep.
You have the head coach trying to be the defensive coordinator. You have the athletic director, Scott Barnes, who I think has been hyper involved in the Pac-12 rebuild. Maybe some of his focus has drifted there instead of being on what he needs to be focused on at Oregon State. And so I think you have this storm of factors, plus the schedule started because it was an independent schedule that they had to put together. It started in a way that was very unforgiving. And so I think it just compounded, and the special teams coach should have been fired in week 2. Like in a normal situation, when you're that bad, you do something proactive. Like you said, they look very reactive here, and that's not a position you want to be in because that doesn't instill faith in your fan base.
It doesn't, and that fan base has got to fund your NIL piece, right? And that your fan base is more important than ever. And if they don't have faith, it is hard to generate the dollars you need to succeed and dig out of the hole that they're in. It seems like they're, instead of trying to climb out, they're digging the thing deeper. It seems like I don't understand fill everybody in on the Blueprint Sports situation and also the deputy AD who apparently doesn't think Gary Payton matters to Oregon State.
Brent Blaylock is his name. And, you know, he got in this back and forth with a couple of former Oregon State athletes, Steve Johnson, the former basketball great, being one of them. And, you know, he's in this meeting. There were other people in the meeting, and I'm told he just floored everybody he said, you know, the athletes were trying to say, or the former athletes were trying to say, hey, you really need to brand the athletes. You need to do a better job of telling the athletes, look, as part of the NIL package, we're really going to brand you. We're going to help you elevate your brand. We're going to make you a name. And he said the names on the back of the jerseys don't matter. Essentially, he said 15 years after Gary Payton's gone, nobody remembers him. And I swear I wish Gary Payton was on that call because he would have socked him right through the computer screen and reminded him how important the athletes are. Like, this is what's important in today's world. The athletes are important. But Blaylock is an interesting figure because he was brought in by Scott Barnes like a year and a half ago. He comes into the chief operating officer role. He, encounters the NIL collective, which was a homegrown NIL collective started by a former athlete named Kyle Bjornstad, who was a former walk-on basketball player, Bjornstad was raising like $5 million a year and helping fund their football operation and basketball operation. And, the House rules changes created a lot of universities that said, hey, we need to bring the NIL collective in-house. Bjornstad said, look, I'd love to just abandon this thing and shutter it like everybody else was doing. A lot of those collectives last spring, people might notice they were just emptying their bank accounts and driving the market bonkers by spending and overspending before the House rules came in. Bjornstad said, I want to get out of it. Oregon State told him, wait a minute, you got a bunch of recurring donations in there. We'd like to hold on to that revenue. Could we maybe just sell this to someone else and outsource it? And so, Bjornstad told me expected Oregon State to go out and find 3 or 4 or 5 buyers. He said they came back with only one, Blaylock being they came back with only one, Blueprint Sports. Now, Blueprint Sports is under fire because it's got, a bunch of these deals out there, 4 or 5 of them, that look very favorable to Blueprint Sports. And in fact, the first $750,000 in revenue goes to Oregon State, but then that next $750,000 to $1.15 million, that $400,000 after you reach that threshold, 75% of that goes to Blueprint Sports. So they're getting a big fat commission in the middle there where they recoup all their expenses. And then it's a 50-50 revenue split beyond that. So Oregon State's position is, hey, look, it would have cost us a bunch of money to do this in-house. We would have had to hire people. There were some hard costs we would have had to absorb. This is far better, and Blueprint's going to bring us money we wouldn't have had otherwise. We're happy to split that. But the detractors are all looking around the country and going, that's not a great deal, because by industry standard, it's not a great deal. So I think we saw Arkansas this week backed out of their deal with Blueprint Sports. Currently, they only have a deal with Oregon State, Maryland, and North Carolina State. So I think everybody's looking at the contracts right now.
Gotcha. Boy, that is, you do have to wonder about the future there with the Oregon State at the leadership structure. I would encourage their deputy AD to drive down to Eugene, stand on a street corner in the middle of downtown, and ask if anybody's ever heard of Kenny Wheaton.
Yeah.
Or Joey Harrington or LaMichael James. I mean, that is the connective tissue that serves as a foundation for all these partners. Go to Berkeley and ask anybody if they've heard of Marshawn Lynch. That is a preposterous position for him to take. If I were the AD, I'd probably fire the guy just for that. I mean, you can't have that. It's a terrible representation of your athletic department.
Yeah. To be fair to Blaylock, look, he's done some positive things in baseball and in basketball, but football is where you butter your bread. And you can't get on a call with Steve Johnson, who's, people still know him, and you can't talk bad about Gary Payton and say nobody remembers Gary Payton. Everybody remembers Gary Payton. And so if this really is just somebody who's saying, hey, the athletes don't matter, you don't want that person communicating with donors and former athletes. You keep that person behind the scenes. But if I'm Scott Barnes, I hand him a cardboard box and go, hey, it's not a good fit. And and take Blueprint with you, because you can buy your way out of that deal. There's about an $850,000 cost to get out of that deal, but you can buy your way out of that deal and make that money back.
Yep. And this is not a good time for Oregon State to be losing ground relative to the other schools in the new Pac-12. And that seems like what's happening.
Yeah. And it was going so well, right? It was like tracking in the right direction. And then the game started and it just hasn't been good.
Yep.
Moving on. Speaking of, traction, Stanford getting a big donation, $50 million gift. What do you make of this?
Well, it's big for Stanford on a number of levels. The donor is a guy named Bradley Freeman, who endows the football head coaching position. For, people may remember David Shaw, the Bradley Freeman director of football coaching. And he played football at Stanford. He's got he's a private equity guy and has decided to contribute $50 million. Now, Stanford, they said it's going to go for NIL, operations, all this thing, scholarships. I'm curious to see how they end up dispersing the money specifically, and whether it's going to basically fund their revenue sharing and how much of that, or how much are they going to endow? The devil is to a certain degree in the details, but it is a huge optic win for Andrew Luck, the GM, who I've been told has done a really good job of trying to generate support and financial backing. And it's a big win for Jonathan Levin, the new president. And we'll see if what they can turn it into. But the bottom line is they could have $500 million, and if they can only take transfers from the Ivy League, they're not going to win.
Yeah, there needs to be a broader commitment to football, and
Yeah,
they're not getting the result on the field. And I find this, like, when you get a win like this, when you're not actually getting the result, to me, it tells me that they've made a plea to their donors, going, "Look, we're
yeah,
falling behind. We need this to win football games on the field," and the donors are listening, and
yeah,
key donors.
and to hire a coach too. This
Yeah,
would be a good carrot for a coach. The thing about it is, I've said this before, it is all about willpower with them. It's just they have more money than anybody. They own the peninsula. It is just a matter of willpower, but it's willpower on multiple levels. And this donation is a great start for them, but it is just a start.
I'm curious to see if there'll be a reaction from a donor at Cal, because these two things
Yeah,
have always tried to operate in concert. One goes to the ACC,
right.
the other follows. Will you get a big name donor? Will the Levi's Strauss
Yeah,
family, will they step up and suddenly go, okay, yeah, we're in for 50 as well? I am told that, the AD at Cal spent a lot of time walking around the stadium in Berkeley last week at the game, and was very visible, shaking hands, taking pictures with people, talking to people. So I think the administration at Stanford and the administration at Cal, they seem to be grasping this in a way maybe they didn't before. Wilner, I mean, you tell me, do you see that same thing at Stanford, where Andrew Luck is just a little bit warmer and more engaged with the fans?
well, sure. I think that there's a lot of parallels between Cal and Stanford, right? Both of them have new presidents slash chancellors who are alums of the school and football fans. Both of them hired very popular, famous former players as their GM, Ron Rivera at Cal, Andrew Luck at Stanford. Both of them are in desperate situation given the landscape of revenue sharing, the portal, NIL, ACC travel, all those kind of the revenue, their partial share of ACC revenue, the new ACC plan that allocates a certain amount of league revenue to TV ratings, that kind of thing. There are a lot of headwinds for both schools, and both the president Jonathan Levin at Stanford, Chancellor Rich Lyons at Cal, I think they both get it. So both schools have got a fighting chance for that reason. They're in this position because of years of mismanagement, indifference by previous administrations. These administrations get it. Rich Lyons at Cal, he rode a bike out. They had their homecoming game against Duke. The first thing you see coming out of the tunnel is Oski the Bear on a bike, and then the second thing is Rich Lyons, the chancellor, on a bike
Yeah.
riding around
Yeah.
the stadium. That's what they need. It starts at the top, whether it's a conference leadership situation or a campus leadership. It all starts at the top, right? And it looks to me like Stanford and Cal both have the leadership in place. We'll see if they can execute.
This broke about a week ago, but the Pac-12 years ago had explored private equity. The Big Ten
Yes.
moving towards a private equity partnership. Look, Larry Scott, the Pac-12 commissioner in 2018 or so, he went out and they created the Pac-12 NewCo, and
Yep.
he went out and, like Shark Tank, he tried to, generate a private equity offer that would be an investment in the future of the Pac-12's media rights deals. And, he did get an offer, and he brought it back to his presidents, and his president said, we don't have the appetite yet for private equity. The Big Ten is doing this, and it looks like, they're trying to get everybody on board with it. But where are they, Wilner, and what do you make of it?
Well, I think that they are close to a decision. I was told actually today that next couple of weeks there's a meeting this week. The latest in a chain of meetings at the presidential level, general counsels, chief financial officers. Basically, the proposal is to create something called Big Ten Enterprises, which would be a for-profit revenue generating arm of the conference with its own leadership structure.
Mm.
And essentially, it would have $2 billion in capital infusion, right? But the entity that provides the capital would be 1/20th of an owner. They have 5% of the company, right? Each of the 18 schools would have 5%. The conference office would have 5%, and the private capital funder would have 5%. So you are selling part of your conference's revenue generating arm to an outside company. I think the presidents have got to they've got to make peace with that internally. Are they willing to do that? A lot of these are public universities, right? There's two other interesting pieces. One, they'd establish a tiered revenue system for distributions, which means Ohio State and Michigan are getting more than everybody else. They are the two big holdouts in this. The other is that they would lock up the grant of rights till 2046. So the Big Ten would be basically bound together for 20 years. And if you're Michigan, Ohio State, if you're Penn State, even if you're USC and Oregon and maybe Washington, do you want to be bound for 20 years given all of the massive change that's occurring?
Yeah, a guy named Joe Moglio, who is the former CEO of TD Ameritrade. I talked to him this week. He is also the former head football coach at Coastal Carolina. He has this very amazing story where he was a CEO of a company and then CEO of a football program. I asked him where he thought this was all going, as a guy who's worked in that corporate world. And he does believe that the top 40 schools or so are going to split off at some point. And I said, what's the inflection point? And he says, well, it's either private equity coming in the door or it's the renegotiation of the TV deals. This kind of marries that timeline together and brings private equity in the side door of the conference.
Yeah.
And so I do think they have to be careful. He did point out too that he said you got a bunch of academics who are running these universities. These are not business people, and this is new to them. And they see all this money, and he says it can be overwhelming for them. But this sort of, I think, paves the way for whatever's going to come next. Now, I am a little apprehensive to believe that Michigan and Ohio State are going to sign on for that length of term.
Yep.
Given that we're watching leverage get thrown around now, and they've got leverage. Like, if I'm them, I want a shorter term deal. Bring the money in, but I want a shorter term deal because I want to renegotiate every 5 years.
Absolutely. And they're the holdouts. I mean, you have to ask yourself, who does this benefit, right? It certainly benefits Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, because it makes the Super League much less likely. If Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State are bound to the Big Ten until 2046, it's going to be hard to form a Super League of 40 teams, right? So it creates long-term stability for the Big Ten, which benefits Petitti. Does it benefit Fox? Fox basically owns Big Ten media rights. And I'm not sure that Fox is in favor of this, which is a whole nother story. It benefits the Purdues and the Minnesotas because it keeps the Big Ten together. So there's less likely that the big boys leave. But at the same time, the disparity in revenue is going to be such that it's going to be impossible for the bottom, 12 or 14 schools to compete because they're going to do 2 or 3 tiers of revenue. And if you're on the bottom tier, you're in big trouble. UCLA is going to be on that bottom tier, by the way. Yeah. You're going to be in big trouble on a competitive basis.
Pivoting forward, the Pac-12 has the help wanted sign out. They are starting to beef up the conference staffing. Teresa Gold,
10 months away.
Yeah. I mean, July 2026, they'll begin operations, but I'm told Teresa Gold is looking for a deputy commissioner. They're also looking for a head of communications. They have operated in a bare bones way with, some staffers handling both the media communications and doing tweets and handling branding and running meetings. I mean, they've just kind of piecemealed this to this point. Looks like they're starting to hire. Is this a good job? Who should they hire? And what should Teresa Gold be looking for in a deputy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, certainly for the communications piece, if you kind of ignore the last, what has it been, 2 years, and just think back over the sweep of the previous 15.
Yeah.
Their communication, their messaging, the strategic 40,000 foot view, it was terrible. because it was all based on serving Larry Scott,
Yeah.
right? And that it was an upside down situation. I think that they should look. You know who does a great job with strategic communications is the Big 12.
Mhm.
They are very aggressive on that front because they need to be aggressive. They're the Big 12, right? They're not the ACC or the
Yeah.
SEC or Big 10. You got to be aggressive. So I think they need to look at somebody who will be proactive and understands college sports. How many times have we talked about, you and I, off air, so to speak, over the years? The Pac-12 doesn't have anybody who understands college sports,
Right.
right? I mean, there was a couple people here and there, and Gould was one of them, understood college sports. Former Deputy Jamie Zaninovich understood college sports. But a lot of the people Larry Scott hired, plus Larry Scott and George Kliavkoff, didn't understand college sports.
Yeah, they hadn't played. They had Larry had played an individual. He played tennis. He was Harvard-educated tennis player. George was a rower. You need somebody who has been in a locker room who understands team dynamic. And
they had a lawyer running the football show, right? I mean, that's what happens, right?
Woody
That's
Dixon.
The
Thanks
recipe for dissolution is when you appoint your general counsel in charge of your football program. Enough said. So who do you think they should hire as a deputy? Or what would you say is the model?
Here's the model for me, because, I feel like you may be able to put forth, hey, the Pac-12 Conference of Champions, Jackie Robinson played here, Bill Walton played here, John Elway played here, Andrew Luck played here. You can say that. But we all know that the New World Pac-12 is survivalists. It's a wilderness survivalist called Oregon State and Washington State. It's Fresno State that has this massive inferiority complex and a chip on its shoulder because it's not LA or the Bay Area.
Yep.
It's Boise State that is gritty and punches above its weight. It's Gonzaga, pound for pound, the best fighter in college athletics. So you are scrappers and fighters. And so you can't think like king of the jungle. You're not a lion. You're not even a hippo.
Yeah.
You are a mosquito, but you are dangerous. A mosquito can be a killer. So I think you need a deputy who maybe has worked at one of those schools or is familiar with the chip on your shoulder stuff, because I think as much as Teresa Gould can handle sort of the diplomacy of it and, fighting and arguing for her and advocating for her conference, you need somebody in there who, the minute you see an opportunity, is going to be an opportunist and punch and come out of their shoes swinging. You need a little bit of a fighter there. And I think somebody that has a little moxie, somebody who's a fighter, I don't know who that is, but that's who I'd want to put alongside Teresa Gould.
The other thing they need to do is they need to put on retainer 4 or 5 people who would basically serve as a football advisory committee. Giving Gould some advice, giving Merton Hanks some advice. Basically they are your roving instructors, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their hands are everywhere. And you have them available for advice. And I could list off 5 people in a heartbeat that they should put on there. And because the most important thing is going to be able to get football right at the legislative level, at the financial level, at the recruiting and strategic levels. Operationally, they can't miss, and they need as much brain power as possible.
Yeah, I would put people like Chris Peterson, Mike Riley, Oliver Luck,
Jeff Tedford.
Jeff Tedford, people who are familiar with your schools.
Chris Hill.
And football. Chris Hill would be great, former Utah AD. There's a number of people on that advisory committee. That's a great idea, in addition to the deputy commissioner job. But we'll see. They're going to round those positions out. Let's pivot to the weekend. Big games ahead. You're going where? Washington and Oregon? What are you doing?
I'm gonna be I'm on the I-5 train. I'll be at the Washington Rutgers game Friday night, and then Oregon Indiana on Saturday. Late night drive, staying in Vancouver. We'll see if the Washington.
You're gonna drive with me? You want to hop in? We'll go down to the game.
Let's go from Portland to Eugene. I had hoped to do the triple. I'd hoped to be able to get to Oregon State, Wake Forest as well, and was originally told that Oregon, Indiana might be the 4:30 game on NBC for the Big Ten. Instead, I don't remember which game is 4:30, but is not It is not Oregon. Oregon, Indiana is at 12:30, same time as Oregon State, Wake Forest. So I unfortunately had to pick one of the two games in Oregon, and don't want to miss that. That's a huge game.
Huge game. Who would have thought Indiana? Last time I saw Indiana at Autzen Stadium, Indiana upset a Mike Bellotti coach team, bunch of turnovers and a big game. And look, I used to cover IU as a beat reporter. They never mattered. It was never a big game where they went somewhere to play, but this is a huge one. I mean, given what we saw happen to Penn State a week ago, now there's a lot of curious eyes on Eugene and going, hey, wait a minute. Did that win on the road for Oregon, was it really as good as everybody thought? Indiana coming to Autzen, I expect the Ducks to win, but I think that is a big-time test, especially for Tosh Lupoi and Oregon's defense. And it's a huge game in the greater picture. Like, I think you can lose 2 and still make the playoff in today's world if you're in the Big Ten. But if you're Oregon, getting this one keeps you on the inside track and keeps you gives you some buffer and a little bit of margin, gives you a couple mulligans. If you lose this one, suddenly it gets interesting. You have to go to Iowa. You got Washington. There's some interesting road ahead for the Ducks. But man, the Penn State UCLA thing, is it a Rosetta Stone? Can we trust what we're getting? Like, does it explain anything to us, or was it just Penn State was so distracted and broken by the Oregon loss that they just showed up? Like, I think we find out a little bit more of that at Autzen Stadium on Saturday.
We will for sure. I certainly was watching Penn State, UCLA, thinking, oh, maybe Oregon's win wasn't as impressive as we thought, right? And it's not like Penn State was overwhelming in their first 3 games against cream puff opponents the way they should have been. In some of those games, Oregon beats their opponents by 60. Penn State wasn't doing that to Nevada or FIU. So I'm real curious to see what happens at Autzen. I think the Big Ten, it would be bad for the Big Ten if Indiana gets beat badly. Very bad. If you're looking at it from the lens of Big Ten playoff bids, what's the pathway to 4 bids? They need Indiana to play close here. If Indiana gets beat badly, and then you add in the Penn State loss to UCLA, if things start to get a little bit tricky for the Big Ten, I think.
Yeah, and I have a feeling this game's going to be played in the 20s. Like, I just feels like points are going to be hard to come by. Right now, I'm leaning like 27-24. That would be a game Tony Petitti could live with. Something like that.
What are we going to get weather-wise? It's going to be cold. Is it going to be?
Yeah, the weather turned. It's been weird, but the weather turned, and it looks like you might get some precipitation. It's turned into kind of a gray fall, and just a couple of days ago, it was nice and sunny and 70 degrees, but starting to turn and get a little cooler and look more like October.
That's because Mother Nature knows I'm coming.
Right, probably. No doubt.
I never miss a chance to drive I-5 in the rain with the logging truck in front of me.
There you go. I love that. What else are your eyes? What else are your eyes this weekend?
I'm going the state of Utah versus state of Arizona is one way to frame it, right? BYU at Arizona, ASU at Utah. Part of the backdrop here is the Holy War is next week. Utah at BYU. So this is a look ahead, but slightly look ahead trap situations for the 2 Utah schools, right? Now, there's no way Utah should be looking past ASU.
Right.
But they do have their big rival next weekend. And there's no way BYU should be looking past Arizona. Arizona's like 4-1, right? It's a road game. I'm curious to see how those both play out in relation to what they're going to tell us about the Big 12 race. Is Arizona legit under Brent Brennan here? Is BYU's defense as good as it looks? Can Utah move the ball against a high quality opponent, because they couldn't against Texas Tech? And is ASU going to come out of there with another 3-point win? Every game ASU plays, it seems like, is a 3-point game. So should be 2 really interesting games setting up the Holy War on the 18th.
I think Texas Tech is really good.
Yeah.
Like really good, like elite, still underrated, sitting at like 9th in the AP poll, underrated. Like, I think they're really good. And so I'm kind of looking at Utah going, this Utah ASU game, I think, is going to be great. Arizona's a little bit of a pretender to me. I think they're better. but I look at their schedule and their wins, and I'm struggling to find a meaningful win that tells me that they're really a contender at the top of that conference. And so here comes this opportunity. So I kind of like BYU, and then I think the other one's a dogfight. But we'll see. I just think it's going to prove that Texas Tech, I think you and I both thought Utah might win the Big 12, and then Texas Tech made them look bad. I think Texas Tech is that good.
They certainly have got the talent on the line of scrimmage, because if you can push Utah around, you can push anybody around.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. Make sure that you leave us your feedback. Tell us what games you're looking forward to in the comment section. Tell us what qualities a deputy commissioner in the Pac-12 should have. What do you make of the mess at Oregon State? Tell us in the comment section. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Read me at JohnCanzano.com. Read him at WilnerHotline.com. And please stay out of our way if you're on I-5 heading south Saturday and you see us behind a logging truck making our way to Autzen Stadium.
Thanks, everybody.